Welcome to another episode of Decolonizing Conversations. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm Anussha, and this Decolonizing Conversation started as a graduation project, and I worked on it for about 6 months, and then I've taken a bit of a gap to because I was occupied with my job, but now I'm back to it, or at least I'm making videos about it. The project is essentially about how people interact with spaces. And when I talk about space, there are three things in it, which is the built environment, that is, like, for example, indoors, office spaces, maybe even parks, and the benches that are placed in parks can be part of a built environment. Then is the people itself and how they interact with it. So for like you and me going to a space, and the third part is nature. For that is the natural environment. That is the grass and the trees and the forest and the lakes and the beaches. So that the three spaces, and Decolonizing Conversation sort of brings all three of them together and talks about how it varies from different cultures. And so my research question asks, can cultural background influence a person's approach to leisure? And leisure in this context means a life outside of work. So, for example, what do you do in your free time? Do you go and watch Netflix, or do you go and sit in a park, or do you go outside for a run? Do you go for hikes? Or do you maybe work out indoors in a gym? Or do you prefer hanging out indoors with your friends? Or do you want to spend your free time outside under the shade of a tree? And these choices are essentially, obviously they are based on individual pathology, but it's not just about, for example, what I like or what somebody else likes. If you go into a more, as a researcher, if you look at it from a broader perspective, it is also how an individual's environment and culture influences these choices. For example, Mumbai again has 12.3% green cover. Safety, well-being, a work-life balance is definitely something that developing countries are not. They're not there yet. And so if I don't feel safe enough, or if I don't feel like a green space is accessible enough to me, then I'd rather spend my time indoors versus somebody from a different culture, for example in the Netherlands or in a more developed country. If they have a park right outside, if their natural environment and their built environment already incorporates a lot of green cover and green spaces. For example, even Singapore with biophilic nature, they're very good at it. How would that then influence an individual's choices? Last week I mentioned Peter Thiel's book 0 to 1, and he asks a very interesting question, which is, what is one contrarian truth that you believe that other people may not believe? And for me, that is that although human beings come from nature, and intuitively we should be having a very strong connection with natural ecosystems, because of the times that we live in, because of the digital realm intersecting with our lives and almost overtaking it, I suppose, that there is a huge disconnect, and the gap seems to be widening between what our lives are and the natural world. So I believe that developing a connection with nature is no longer something that just is that we're born with, but it's like a skill that we have to develop, and we have to nurture that relationship and explore our interests and sort of rebuild and try to bring nature back into our lives. So in the past year, I've been working in the education space, mostly the alternate education space that really looks at the child as a whole and works in a more interdisciplinary manner with technology, art, and science. Although I had a good quality education, it was one of the more traditional setups that was inspired from the or derives a lot from its industrial roots. So the outcome is to mass produce a lot of children that are then eligible to work in a factory, for example, with the standardized testing and the equal way of studying for and so I've really been looking at the different schools that are now being created to explore different avenues and look at education in a more creative way. And after leaving my job, I took a month off and I visited Singapore and Bali. And over there, I saw the Green School of Bali, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's a bit cut off from the rest of Bali. It's isolated. You have to travel a bit there to get there, and there's a lot of bamboo architecture, and its approach to education is that children are interacting not only with their books and learning how to read and write, but they're also interacting with the space because the school is in a jungle. So sustainability and nature sort of intervened with how a child navigates a child's journey in a day. So from, for example, 7 to 3 a.m., you're walking, it's raining outside, the classrooms have no walls, so you can really see like the rain and like the interacting with the animals, and there's a waterfall, and to go from one space to the other you have to trek down. And that's definitely something that's so interesting to me from the perspective of decolonizing conversations and integrating green spaces in our lives. So and sustainability is just part of the curriculum. So it's not an afterthought. It's not after developing something we ask, okay, we've damaged the earth from 0 to 1, and now from 1 to 2 we gotta fix what we built. So they really look at the world in a different way, which I think is very interesting. If I had to think about the Green School from an Indian designer's perspective and ask the question, would the Green School of Bali cater to an Indian demographic? Because when I visited, I saw a lot of Australians, I saw a lot of people from Britain, saw a lot of people from Thailand, like from France, from Chile, all over the world, but there was no Indian. And the Indonesians, if they wanted to, the local villagers who may not be able to pay the high tuition fee because it's an international and experimental school, they were offered scholarships, and they could then also join the education system. So when I think about, would a school like the Green School work in India for Indian parents, I'm not sure, even though I think it's a phenomenal concept. If you look at the reality of it and look at the majority of the Indian population, which is lower middle class and middle class, and this is just a speculation, a hypothesis, which is, I don't think that Indian parents who don't have a safety net and for whom social mobility is so important would then be deviating from the traditional path, be something that they are open to, because it is a risk to create some, like, if you're not being set up to be a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, where there is, like the path of like, okay, if I study this and if I do this and I do this, I'm gonna earn a certain amount and I'll be someone in the world. And then when you enter Green School Bali, we're like, okay, you're a change maker, we're preparing you for the future, and we don't know what the future is, but which I think is not maybe the best sell to Indian parents, unless there are tangible results of, okay, somebody, but so that's definitely something that I would keep in mind, especially because when you talk about raising change makers in an Indian environment, which is again, like in a developing nation, it's a bit chaotic, it's a bit patriarchal, it's a bit set in their systems. I just worked in the Indian corporate, so I feel like I really understand like the rigidity of traditional systems. So if you get someone who's been trained to be a disruptor, to be a change maker, to have like an entrepreneurial point of view, how much would they fit in, and how much emotional resilience can a child or like now an adult have to create effective change, So that's just a thought that I had about if green school would work in India or not. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. If you've made it so far, thank you for watching. And if you didn't, I guess you're not watching this. So the book that I'd like to recommend at the end of the video is Confabulations by John Berger. It's again a very, very interesting read about, and it's a bit poetic, it's a bit philosophical, it's a bit artistic, and yeah, just sort of opened my mind up to a different way of writing and a different way of being, which is very admirable. Just the way his way, John Berger's way of words, is just amazing, I think. And there's a line that I really like. I mean, I've underlined almost most of the book because every word is important. But there's something that I really like, which is like it's something that Einstein has explained, which is our lives are not points on a line which is today being amputated by the instant greed of the unprecedented global capitalist order. We're not points on a line, rather we are centers of a circle, which, yes, it makes so much sense, I think, especially I think because I just left the Indian corporates. It's very pretty dispensable, I think, and you can really feel like you're a point on a line and easily be cut off and replaced by the next person to fill the role, which can definitely suck out some of the idealism out of you. This line of being the center of a circle is something that really gives a lot of hope and reminds you that you can also make a difference in whatever thoughts that you have. So if you like the video, don't forget to subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and see you next week.